beyond the mainstream media.
And it is that while the lethality of their power is greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people. Literally, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people.
The smoke in the air of our Concord bridges and Pearl Harbors is always smelled first by the farmers who come from their simple homes to find the fire and fight.
If you embark on instituting a society where government protects you from yourself, you're in big trouble, and that's what they're doing. That's all government is force. I mean, do you have a choice about paying Medicare taxes? This government uses force to mold behavior or mold the economy. They've overstepped the bounds, and they violated the whole concept of our revolution and our Constitution.
Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday edition of the Freedom Link here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. I'm Joe Joseph. Tonight I've got a very special guest, TMOTofGA. That's his YouTube username. Also, his real name is Derrick Grayson. He's a minister out of Stone Mountain, Georgia, and I'm so glad to have you on the show, Derrick, because tonight we've got a special announcement by Ron Paul, and hopefully that yields some pretty positive things. But your drive time videos that I watch on YouTube all the time, you speak very highly of Ron Paul, and I too feel the same way. I mean, the guy to me is one of the last best hopes that we have outside of, I don't know. What's your take on it? And welcome to the show, by the way.
Glad to be here, Joe. Glad to be here. I think the last, I look at that a little differently. Yes, indeed, I do think very highly of Ron Paul, primarily because of his dedication and commitment to maintaining his integrity while roaming amongst the den of thieves and robbers and wolves in sheep's clothing. He has not allowed himself to become like the room. Secondly, he is responsible for my awakening in terms of realizing just how far we have strayed from constitutional principles. However, I would disagree that he is our last best hope. We, the people, are our last best hope.
Well said.
Ron Paul is only one man who has been the impetus of igniting the spark that has reawakened liberty and freedom in the hearts and minds of many who had fallen asleep at the wheel, namely myself being one of them. So I am thankful to Ron Paul for that.
You know, I often think of his campaign and the liberty movement in general. I equate it to the movements of Gandhi and of Martin Luther King because, they both accomplished some great things nonviolently and always preached nonviolence. And, Ron Paul's the same way. And his activism is through education, through educating the masses, through educating the young people. And Ron Paul was kind of integral in my awakening process as well. So I can certainly relate to you there. But do you see any parallels between Ron Paul and, say, like a Martin Luther King or a Gandhi?
I see parallels with Ron Paul, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and Jesus Christ. When I was singing the song by Jimi Hendrix, Bold as Love, I dubbed it Bold as Paul. I welled up with tears singing the chorus part as Paul, because it reminded me of John the Baptist, who cried in the wilderness, knowing that it would cost him or could cost him his life, and it did, just as Jesus Christ did. The difference, however, is, and I'm thankful that they have not taken Ron Paul away from us, turned him into a martyr, simply because we, the people, have not been listening. But the more we start to listen, the more Ron Paul becomes a threat. And Ron Paul has become a threat. One thing people in politics have learned, when you turn people into martyrs, things definitely do turn for the worse as it relates to them. And I think that is the reason why the media has gone so far out of its way to keep Ron Paul in the closet, and they have only been able to be successful at it is because we as Americans have allowed ourselves to become dependent upon the government and mainstream media for 15, 20, 30-second or 60-second sound bites. And so we don't dig, but most of us that have found our sense about ourselves, we have gone to the internet for the most part for our information and exchange of ideas. I used to be a Fox junkie. And, I swore by Fox, man. I got all my information from Fox. And so when I realized that Fox was just a bigger culprit as the rest, I knew then that the mainstream media could not be trusted to tell the truth at all.
I was the same way, by the way. I served in Clinton's military, and I'll tell you what, that was the thing in the military was the emergence of Fox News. And what was interesting is on the military television channels that would be piped over satellite, and I was in the Navy, so it was on the ships, it was all Fox News. That's what the military was pumping into you. So, even that's what they gave you, was kind of like that whole neoconish talking point type of thing to help support some of the things that were going on overseas and some of the things that we were doing over in Iraq. At the time, I was supporting the Oil for Food program, enforcing sanctions off the coast of Iraq. And, that it was a crappy job. And people were pissed, like, why are we here? What the heck are we doing? And people were asking the questions then. But the rhetoric that we were fed and the talking points that we were fed directly contributed to me not questioning that any further, because all it did was validate what my command was telling me. And that's what was being fed to me via Fox News. But, it happens everywhere. Like today, the mainstream media, CNN came out with a hit piece on the ammo purchases that are going on and defended the Social Security Administration for wanting to have target practice with hollow point munitions. Who in the hell who target practices with hollow points? That's what I want to know. Could I get let me get your take on that.
Listen, I've been telling folk, you know how you've heard the expression, the handwriting is on the wall.
Sure.
Don't ignore the signs. Our government, behind the scenes, are strategically putting things in place so that, in other words, when you begin to build a building, you got to make sure your foundation is laid. We have things like TSA. We have things like NDAA of 2012. We have places like Gitmo that never closed down, okay? And we have troops being trained with hollow point bullets. There are reasons for all of these things. And why? Because when the time comes to pull the trigger, they want the infrastructure in place to deal with civil unrest, because like Martin Luther King said, just as Ron Paul reiterated, A lie can't live forever. And when that lie starts to die, people are willing to do any and everything they can to maintain control or their power. And that's what it's all about. I mean, Barack Obama, the man who won the Nobel Peace Prize.
What a joke.
Yeah, but sent planes to Libya to kill Muammar Gaddafi because Muammar Gaddafi was about to do some things that was going to threaten their power base.
That's right. Now, we're going to get into so much more when we come back. I'm absolutely thrilled to have Derrick on the show tonight as we're going to talk about a whole host of issues. So don't go away, folks. We're just heating up here on the Freedom Link. So we'll be back in 3 minutes' time after the commercials. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back, folks. Don't forget the email address is thefreedomlink@centurylink.net. That's thefreedomlink@centurylink.net. Joe Joseph here with my special guest, Derrick Grayson, known as the Minister of Truth on YouTube. His YouTube channel, TMOTofGA. And, you said something that really struck me, when you said the writing is on the wall. That saying is rich in history, and it goes back, folks. If you don't know where the origin of that saying is, it comes from Babylon itself. I mean, this is a very historical, and this is why I always tell you guys, and I know there's a lot of people out there that'll say, why the Bible, it's been hijacked. It was written by people to coerce you, to get you off the beaten path. Well, let me tell you something, folks. That is probably one of the richest historical documents in mankind, in all of human history. And the writing on the wall takes you back to a prophecy where Belshazzar, who was the son of Nebuchadnezzar being the king of Babylon. Belshazzar takes over for his father, and I mean, just totally corrupt. And, he's having this party where he goes into the temple. He takes all the cups from the temple, all the gold, and they go and they start drinking out of all the golden cups and all this out of there. And by that time, God says, no, this is enough. And so a hand appears and it starts writing on the wall, and it says, Mina, Tekel, Upharsin. That's the Hebrew, and the translation to that is, God hath numbered your kingdom and finished it. And not soon after that, the Medes and the Persians come in and goodbye Babylon. And here we are today in a similar situation where we just have corruption rampant everywhere, and the signs are out there. People, I mean, how many different ways do you need to be told that you need to get off your butt and do something about this? Because there's going to be a time when there's going to be the United States is not going to exist in its present form. It's just not going to happen. As a matter of fact, it doesn't exist in to me, it's just a sliver of what the United States used to be. What's your take on that, Derrick?
Well, I'm a Bible-believing man. I believe in prophecy. Mm-hmm. I believe that all of this shall be brought to naught when Jesus returns. Now, that's my belief system. I know many folk don't accept that, and that's fine. I ain't mad with them. They ain't got to. And so when people say to me, well, why are you going through all of these changes about Ron Paul? Why are you trying to get this done and that done if you know it ain't going to come to nothing? Because Jesus said, occupy until I come. When you occupy, that means you get out, you get involved, you try to make the world a better place for those that you come in contact with. I may not be able to change the world, but I can definitely do things that will make the world a better place for those that I come in contact with. Part of that process compels me to be involved in the political process, because the decisions that people make in Washington, D.C. affect not only the whole of this country, but the world at large. And when we allow bastards to go to Washington and do all types of things that are contrary to the will of righteousness, the will of God, moral principles, then we are abdicating our responsibility to occupy until I return.
That's right. MLK said it best to me. He said, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that's neither safe nor politic nor popular, because he must do it because conscience tells him it is right. It's standing by your convictions, regardless of what's politically correct, what people may think as popular or right in their eyes. There comes a time when you have to stand for what you believe in, for what your values and virtues tell you, and for what your morality tells you. And I often hear, well, a vote for Ron Paul is a vote wasted. Because if you do that, then Obama's going to get in for 4 more years. And you have to vote for the lesser of two evils. And my problem is the lesser of two evils is still evil. And why would you associate your name with evil if you stand for the truth and righteousness? How could you do that? What's your thought on that?
My thought on that is this. But before I answer your question on that one, I want to read you one more quote where I can then go ahead and answer that. This is another quote from Martin Luther King, and it says, "The hottest place in hell is reserved for those who remain neutral in times of great moral conflict." Okay, so with that, my whole thing about a vote for Ron Paul is a waste of a vote. You see, and I've been on this and telling folk, and people still ask me, why aren't I voting for Gary Johnson? Why aren't I voting for Mitt Romney? Why am I going to allow Obama to stay in office? With me, it comes down to principles. Ron Paul, somebody made the statement about Ron Paul that he hasn't accomplished anything in 30 years, which is absolutely untrue. At the very least, Ron Paul showed that it was possible to go into a room and not become like the room, or to become a go-along, get-along politician. His wife, Carol Paul, said it best. She said, "My husband told me he doesn't want to be a politician. He wants to be a statesman." And so I explained to people, I voted for the lesser of two evils before in my life. Now, prior to voting for the lesser of two evils, I was one of those party line dunce heads. If this is what the party voting for, then that's who I'm voting for. I can recall in my younger days going, and anything that was Democrat, that's what I voted for. Or anything that was Republican, that's what I voted for. Forget about the issues. Forget about integrity. Forget about their record. And so now I have a choice of maintaining my integrity or voting for the lesser of two evils. Evil is still evil. And I have made a couple of videos on this. I am going to vote for Ron Paul, even if it may not count in factuality with our voting system. It will count towards my integrity, because I know I would have voted my conscience and for the person I know who is best for this country. Now, people just need to deal with that. I am not going to vote for Mitt Romney because I may as well be voting for Obama. I would certainly not vote for Obama. Been down that path, won't go down that path again. That was the first time I voted for the lesser of two evils, because I couldn't recognize who the Republican Party was anymore. If I had been awakened then, I would have voted for Ron Paul in 2008, but I was asleep at the wheel. So they may consider it a waste of a vote, but to me, it is a referendum against the system. My example, and this young lady sent me an email, and I'm going to make a video about it tomorrow, but she said to me, there's this group out there that's trying to get people to jump ship over to Gary Johnson. It's called I Am Ron Paul or something to that effect. And I need you to defriend the people that are a member of it, to show them that we won't stand for it, et cetera, et cetera. And I told her, listen.
Hold that thought. Let's get into your response to that email when we come back.
Sure.
Because that needs some clarification. Folks, remember, too, again, I'm going to bring up the Bible, historical document. You know, he talked about being neutral, and it's, you know, because you're lukewarm and not hot or cold, Welcome back, folks. Don't forget to visit great alternative sites like theintelhub.com and federaljack.com. Each day they put out some great stories, some great opinion pieces, so check them out. That's federaljack.com, theintelhub.com. Joe Joseph here, along with Derrick Grayson, goes the Minister of Truth, TMOTofGA on YouTube. And, you know, you talked about a letter you got about the Gary Johnson campaign. And could you just recap what that letter said again and what your response was?
Essentially, there's a group called I Am Ron Paul, or My Name is Ron Paul, something to that effect. And there were members of the group trying to get people to move to the Gary Johnson side of things. And the young lady sent me a message asking me to get involved and defriend some people, et cetera, et cetera. And I told her, I'm not concerned about that because I've chosen my course. I wouldn't worry about that if I were you either. And her response back to me was she was disheartened that I wouldn't get involved in that particular skirmish. And I told her the best example we can give anyone is to lead by example. By my staying steadfast since last October when I started stating that I am in this with Ron Paul, win, lose, or draw, all the way up to November 6th. I'm with Ron Paul no matter what happens. I won't even look at anybody else until after November 6th. That is it. I said, I have stayed that course, and I say if you do the same thing, then, you know, that negates what they're doing. That shows people how you do this thing. I say, but arguing back and forth with them and defriending people have a right to believe whatever they want to believe. But if you show other Ron Paul supporters that you are going to stay the course, it only takes one man or woman to stiffen the spines of others. And so she came back, and I'm glad you said that. She said, I guess what I'll do instead is start another group called I Am Mitt Romney and start trying to get it. I said, now that's a better idea. You know, convert other people rather than fighting with those who are against you. Start converting others. I listen wholeheartedly what Jesus said about shaking the dust from your feet. Okay. When people won't receive you, you move on because there is somebody else who will. And the way to lead people is to lead by example. That's why I have never questioned, never wavered, never doubted. I don't even doubt Ron Paul because the man has shown me 30 years of integrity. So why should I start doubting him now? I was the one who had the problem because I was the one who wasn't paying attention to who was minding the shop. So that was my response. I tell people, stay the course, stand at post, pick up your weapon, and be watchful. Jesus said, be watchful.
And that's all good advice. I mean, this is stuff. This was said 2,000 years ago, folks, 2,000 years ago. And look at how applicable it is today. Today, a front page of Drudge Report, Democrats drop God from party platform. The Brody file says, guess what? God's name has been removed from the Democratic National Committee platform. Oh, what a surprise. That's my response. This is a paragraph that was in the 2008 platform. It says, quote, we need a government that stands up for the hopes, values, and interests of working people. Yeah, because that's what happened. And gives everyone willing to work hard the chance to make the most of their God-given potential. Now the words God-given have been removed. And the paragraph has been restructured to say, we gather to reclaim the basic bargain that built the largest middle class and the most prosperous nation on earth. The simple principle that in America, hard work should pay off, responsibility should be reward, and each one of us should be able to go as far as our talents and drive should take us. Now that, in and of itself, well, of course. I mean, that's the way the United States, that's the way America was supposed to be. You know, you work hard, you earn a wage or or earns some sort of monetary. You get paid for doing your job, and that's it. And you go about your life. But the problem is, that's all rosy. But that's not the way it works in this country, is it?
No, it's not the way it works anywhere. I preached a sermon on words or phrases out of the Bible, and before I tell you about that, Obama. And I've been listening to the platform news concerning this, and they've made it plain that this is Obama's platform, and it'll be presented, and most folk won't know anything about it prior to that because it's his platform. I was excommunicated from one of my churches, and I say excommunicated because I disagreed with the theology that is taught by many Protestant churches, primarily that of tithing.
People you mean the church doctrine, that type of stuff?
Yes. And so people have a problem with that. They take the word and they bastardize it. What Obama is trying to do is to eliminate the word of God for his purposes, because he don't want people looking to God. He would rather people look to men. And in the Bible, there are two phrases, and I forget the number of times that is mentioned, but you hear the word, he is a man of God, okay, or the Son of Man. Now, what people don't understand, and somebody said to me the other day, and you're supposed to be a man of God, I responded, I am not a man of God. I am a man who serves God. See, the term Son of Man signifies that Jesus, who is God, came to earth and came down to man's level. It was God made flesh. That's why he referred to himself as the Son of Man. He is the Son of God who was remade himself in the image of man, in other words, mortal, prone to the same issues. However, he looked to God for his strength. So, but when we take the term, I'm a man of God, we are trying to elevate ourselves to God's stature. That's why I tell folk, don't call me a man of God. I am a man who serves God. Men throughout history have always looked to something greater than them. Why? Because they recognize at the simplest level that there are some things that they just are not responsible for. We are not responsible for the weather. We are not responsible for the fact that the earth stays in the same place in its orbit around the sun, the creation of the galaxies. We aren't responsible for. We know that there is something in our spirit that is greater than us. And we've always looked to explanations for it. That's why the Bible is one of the greatest books ever written. Okay? It tells us we look to God because in him all things are held together. And I don't want to preach. I say all that to say, when man recognizes his place in the order of things, God first, man second, he does well. He prospers. But when you remove God from the crux of it, what do you start to see? You see a moral decay in society. We remove God from the school. Now we have kids who have boyfriends and girlfriends, girls walking around in public schools that are pregnant, all manner of nonsense. I say, now how can a man who claims to be a Christian say and understand what Christianity is all about, even Judaism or Islam, and say he supports gay marriage? He supports a same-sex marriage. Obama don't give a damn about God at all. And I've told people before, there are people in this world who could care less about what God is about, and they may be good people, but according to my belief system, they're going straight to hell. And then there are those who are actually anti-God. Obama is anti-God. He is anti-God, and people need to wake up. And I told my preacher, the one whose church I just left, I told him, I say, any preacher that would support a man, I say, forget about the political ramifications, but any preacher that claims they love and serve God that would support a man who would support abortion and same-sex marriage, they are not a servant of God. They instead consider themselves men of God. They are placing themselves above God's word. And so I told him, you got to be stupid. And of course, that's what caused him to attack me on my beliefs, because I called him out on it. But, you know, as they say, I'm bold as Paul. I'm going to tell you the truth. Paul stood up and said both the Republican and the Democratic Party are bought and owned by the elite, the rich elite, the Bilderbergs of the world, the Koch brothers, etc., etc.,
Amen.
etc.
Amen to that. Let me stop you there because we're going to break. But you know, you said it best, and you know, when you operate, folks, when you operate from the moral high ground, and when you have righteousness on your side, that's what happens. You get attacked because they have nothing left to get you with, so they're just going to ad hominem attack you and everything else. When we come back, it'll be the last segment of hour number 1, so don't go away. There's still so much to talk about with Derrick Grayson, the minister. Welcome back, folks. Don't forget to tune in every Wednesday and Friday from 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. to Down the Rabbit Hole with Popeye here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. My good buddy Popeye has some great guests scheduled, help you in your awakening process, or give you the tools necessary to help other people see through the muck. Joe Joseph here, along with my newfound friend, Derrick Grayson, TMOTofGA on YouTube. And, you know, I just got an email in from a listener that asked about what your thoughts are on Romans 13. And before I get that, I want to read a little bit about what Romans 13 is and what it means. And I'll give the King James version as best I can here. And it says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but God, the power that be ordained by God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resisteth shall receive to them damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same." And I'm trying to find the portion of it where it says, you know, be subservient to government. And it's just, oh gosh, where the heck did it go? Of course, you know, now that I try to pull it up, I'm having some issues here. But Romans 13, the submission to governing authorities. What is your interpretation of Romans 13?
First off, many of us forget the context a lot of times in which things are being spoken in the Bible, and that's why we go off half-cocked. I'll give you an example. If you have but the faith of a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, be thou removed and cast into the sea. Well, I asked somebody, now, so what you're saying, I can walk up to Stone Mountain and say, hey, Stone Mountain, be thou removed and cast over into the Atlantic Ocean. She said, yeah, all you need is the faith of a mustard seed, the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard taught in church before. However, that is what people do. In the context of this particular scripture, Romans 13, all the way down through verse 6, where it even talks about taxes, we have to understand there are some. This is speaking of the things that God has established. What does God establish? Things that are righteousness. God is saying we are to be subject unto those things. Well, now, if that's what that's talking about, then does that mean am I supposed to subject myself to tyranny? Of course not. I am not supposed to subject myself to tyranny. If there's a way I can loose myself from it, I would do it. Why else would Jesus have said the truth shall make you free? Jesus also, when he came on the scene, did Jesus come and subject himself unto the unrighteousness of the Pharisees and the scribes? Of course not. If he had, they wouldn't have put him up on the cross. So my point is, if you take things in its proper context, we're talking about things founded in God in this scripture, things that are morally right. Just like I tell some of the libertarians who feel that, well, we shouldn't have any taxes and we shouldn't have any military and we shouldn't have. That is completely ridiculous. We shouldn't have any regulate. That is completely ridiculous. There are always going to be people that are going to prey on the weak. What do? They need to be protected. So sometimes we need some regulations that would prevent companies from dumping toxic waste into rivers and reservoirs. We need a military to protect our walls. Jesus said, when you go out on the road, take your coat and your sword. And if you don't have a sword, sell your clothes and buy you a sword. Peter carried his sword with him throughout Jesus' entire ministry. Otherwise, Peter wouldn't have been able to slap that God upside the head with it had he not had a weapon. So my point is, Jesus wasn't against weapons. And what folk don't understand, Jesus had to allow himself to be taken and put up on the cross because he came here for a purpose. But I know I'm digressing. The point is, this scripture is about submitting ourselves to things that are founded in God. Right. And when we see unrighteousness, it is our duty to stand up against unrighteousness. Paul even gave instructions on what you do when you see fools in the church not doing what they're supposed to do. Go to them, talk to them. If they don't listen, go with a witness, talk to them if they don't listen. And then when they don't listen, you then treat them like the infidel. I had breakfast with the godfather of my children this morning, who I met after I was released from prison 20-some years ago. And he and I were talking about a fallout of a church here in Atlanta, a mega church. I won't even mention the name. And we were talking, and he asked me what I was doing, and I asked him, "Were you still there?" And he said, "Yeah, where's somebody going to go?" And blah, 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 blah. Make a long story short, I told him, he explained that, my father laid the groundwork for the church that grew into this mega church. And I say, well, that being the case, you had a responsibility to speak up about the nonsense that was going on in that church long before it happened. I say that was your duty. Because your father laid the groundwork for it, because you were still there, because you were the head deacon there, they even got the chapel named after you. You had a responsibility to expose that nonsense. So don't give me this thing about, well, I just sit back and let God do it and God exposed it. I say that's nonsense. And that's what that quote with Martin Luther King talked about. People who remain neutral in times of great moral conflict, the hottest place in hell is reserved for them.
That's right. I'm right there with you. And just so you know, the reason why I had trouble finding it, now, my Bible's King James Version. King James Version is written differently. That's the older version. If you read the new versions, like, I'm just going to pull this up, folks. This is the New International Version. It says, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against God and what he's instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves." Do you see how things have been rewritten and bastardized? I mean, it's unbelievable, this translation. I mean, it actually makes me... I've seen the Romans 13 argument, but I've really never read it from this new standpoint, by these new versions that were written that totally bastardize things. It just goes to show you that if you're really, truly, if your spirit is seeking and you really want to get Bible truths, you really have to go back to the original Greek and Hebrew to see how things were really written and in what context. And make sure that you use a Bible with a good concordance that can take you back to those original translations. Strong's Concordance is a great one. And that's one thing that I always do is I validate what it is I see. This is a bunch of horse hockey. I mean, I can't believe it.
When I study, that's why I study in the context of God. God would not have me submit myself to something that was contrary to his purposes. Because if the law established a thing that said that every man must have a husband and a wife, that is contrary to the will of God. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So therefore, I will not be subject unto that, because that was not established by God. Okay, it says, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, speaking of those things of God, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. So God doesn't ordain that which is evil. And that's what we are missing when we read that scripture. We think that all power, Jesus says Satan is the ruler of this world. Satan has power too. And Satan ordains evil. Satan ordains all those things that are contrary to that of God. There are evil men who possess power. Okay, and we need to understand that. So we get screwed up on the Bible because we don't understand the context of which things are being written. And that's why we find ourselves going down the wrong path.
Absolutely. But how much easier is it to go down the wrong path when society as a whole has been totally coerced and corrupted? We live in a society now, folks, where you got vibrator commercials on primetime television. I mean, really? I mean, does that not make anybody sick out? Oh, I'm sure a lot of people are like, woo! I mean, come on. But I'm telling you straight up, when you see something like that, that's a sign that there is a serious problem.
2 Corinthians 6:17, therefore come ye out from them and be ye separate. So, yes. I usually don't get into, I try to speak to people from common sense perspective. Evil is going to be around us until Jesus returns. Right. That's not going to change. Okay? No, that is not going to change. That's why it is so important that a Christian, I preached a sermon, and for those who may want to go out and check it out, it's called Christians Who Don't Know Their Own Faith. That is our biggest problem.
Now, do you have that on your YouTube channel? Or
it's on my YouTube. It's on my YouTube channel. Christians Who Don't Know Their Own Faith.
So folks, go check that out. That's TMOTofGA. TMOTofGA, that's his YouTube channel. Hour number 1 is getting ready to close. And hour number 2 is on the way. When we come back, I'm going to talk to Derrick about his activism in his community, especially in the black community, where he's working diligently to help bring down.
And it is that while the lethality of their power is greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people. Literally, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people.
The smoke in the air of our Concord bridges and Pearl Harbors is always smelled first by the farmers who come from their simple homes to find the fire and fight.
But if you embark on instituting a society where government protects you from yourself, you're in big trouble. And that's what they're doing. That's all government is force. I mean, do you have a choice about paying Medicare taxes? This government uses force to mold behavior or mold the economy. They've overstepped the bounds and they violated the whole concept of our revolution and our Constitution.
It's hour number 2 of the Freedom Link, everybody. And again, my special guest tonight is Derrick Grayson, who YouTube channel TMOTofGA, the Minister of Truth. And, we're talking about a whole slew of things tonight. And in hour number 2, we're going to talk a little bit about his activism, what he's doing, especially in his local community and within the black community. Something, Derrick, that's a big things I've been trying to really study a lot lately is this false left-right paradigm, this idea that there is a difference between the left and the right, the idea that, one party's for the rich while the other party's for the working man and everything else. And I just want to maybe get a little bit of insight from you as far as how effective your message is being received, or how well it's being received in your community. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. First off, there are, in the black community, we have many blacks who have awakened to their inner potential to obtain without utilizing or holding on to blame game rhetoric. It's the white man's fault. But more often than not, many of those blacks, they just simply escape the environment. Socially, some of them think that they have to be white-like to be successful. We see that taking place amongst many of our athletes who, when they get money, the first thing they say, well, now that I got money, I need to really get on par with the white man. I'm going to move in a white neighborhood and I'm going to get myself a white woman. That's all part of social conditioning. There are blacks like myself, when we escape poverty, so to speak, we still understand what it is to be black, and we don't have an issue with that. And then there are those who never escape it, who continue to blame the white man for their lot in life, just like the KKK blamed the black man for many of their issues. So that's just the landscape of what goes on in the black community. My activism within the black community has been to bring about an awakening in several areas. First, if God is for you, who can be against you? Now, that's where I draw my strength from. Now, there are folk who do well in the world, and I tell folk, you don't have to love God to make money. You know, Ted Turner, one of the richest men in the world, don't give a damn about God, but he does well financially. So it is possible to do well in life and not care anything about God. However, God is my strength, you know, and it may be somebody else's. But I say all that to say, black man, black woman, if there's something that you seek, all you need to do is get up off your butt and go and do it. I won't use the old cliche, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, because black folk hate that for some reason. The second thing is holding on to the hate of 400 years ago, 500-600 years ago, slavery, et cetera, et cetera. That's just hate. And I tell them, racists will always be with us, both black and white, and not to think they are never going anywhere. So you can let them be your roadblock if you want to, or you can get up and do something for yourself. And then the third lesson, or the third thing I try to teach them, is that the government is not our savior. That is not even their purpose, to be our savior or to provide for us. So those are the three things that we have to overcome first in the black community, and that is we can do for ourselves. We don't need somebody to do for us. The white man, the government, some other black man, we can do for ourselves. I find my strength personally in Jesus Christ, the Lord, my God, my Savior. Secondly, we can't continue to hold on to hate, blaming somebody else for our lot in life. And thirdly, we've got to understand that the government is not our savior. Well, who have we made our savior? Basically, the liberal Democratic Party.
Right.
The Democratic Party has created a new generation of slaves. But see, here is the thing: when I step out of trying to address issues in the black community, I'm telling white folks, you've allowed them to do the same thing to you. Mm-hmm. And now, because there is no difference in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, you got the same coin, or better yet, the same clowns. They just trade circus. They are creating new slaves, and the goal of both parties is to decimate the middle class, and that includes white folks too. And unless white folks open up to that, y'all gonna find yourselves in the same boat as what the Negroes have been in for the last 40, 60 years. After when we got past 1901, when black folks started migrating from the Republican Party into the Democratic Party. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. So black folk have been taught that it is the liberal Democratic Party that has our best interests in heart, and they don't. The only thing they have for us is a handout via social programs, the redistribution of wealth. That is it. If they if they can keep them locked down in that, then so be it. Why do I say it's? Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just say, because you beat me to it. That's one thing I preach all the time, is that slavery exists today. I don't know why people think slavery was abolished. It never went away. Exactly. Slavery exists today. We're all slaves to the current system. And you're right. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. You might as well call them Republicrats, because that's really what they are. I want to play this clip for you real quick, too, because it's a short 17-second clip. And this is right from the Democratic National Convention. They just played this today. Listen to this.
We are committed to all people. We do believe you can use government in a good way. Well, government's the only thing that we all belong to. We're in different churches, different clubs, but we're together as a part of our city or our county or our state. And
the government is the only thing we all belong to. We belong to the government, Derrick. Did you know that? We're slaves.
I learned that when I joined the Navy in 1979.
Oh, and a fellow squid. I didn't even know that. That's awesome, man.
Yep, the last year of Jimmy Carter and the remaining 3 years under Reagan. Absolutely. They told me, they made it plain, you are now government issue. But of course, I serve proudly my country. I have nothing but good things. The military helped to forge what it is to be independent and a man, and helped me to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. When I left home and went into the military, I never returned home as a child. I returned home as a man capable and able of standing on my own 2 feet. I lived in my mother's house all of about 3 months while I put together some money and found stable employment so that I was able to get my own apartment. And so I haven't lived with my parents since that time. So I'm thankful for what the military gave me. So hey, nothing but love.
I'm right there with you too, because I followed the same track as I went to college, flamed out, and I remember my father saying, I'll put you in community college. Well, I didn't want to do that anymore. It's like, look I'm flailing here. Let me go get some discipline. And that was the whole idea. And boy, I'll tell you what, it was one of the best decisions that I ever made. As much as it was kind of in support of these policies, what it did for me was help define my character. Don't go away, folks.
And may be called upon by concentrating your thought energy with definite purpose. Just concentrate, and the powers will be yours.
Folks, if you like what you're hearing here tonight, don't forget to go to YouTube and subscribe to TMOT. That's TMOT of GA. Subscribe to the channel and listen to some of the drive time videos that Derrick all the stuff he has to say. It's great stuff. And you're hearing just a snippet, just a tidbit of what he gets into on his YouTube channel there. So make sure you check it out. And talking about the left-right paradigm, the divide and conquer tactics that we get into, and you said, before the break, you had said, that especially in the black community, the wool's pulled over their eyes in the fact that, slavery really never went away. It was just kind of rebranded and expanded. Now, instead of just being subject to black folk, now it's subject to everybody. Now we're all becoming slaves. Look at some of this economic data that just came out that shows that the average wage in this country has dropped in 4 years from $54,000 a year on average to $50,000 a year on average, a $4,000 decrease in a 4-year period of time. But have you noticed that things are a lot more expensive? That's because this is one of those things that Ron Paul teaches about these invisible taxes that they get you with. So while the fat cats are getting fatter, the peeps like you and me, we're getting leaner. And it's getting harder to function. And I trace this back a little bit, you know, when I look at where society started to break down, Derrick, I look specifically to a couple of events. One thing that really stands out for me is the start of the women's liberation movement. Taking mom out of the family structure and putting her to work and having people raise your children for you. Do you see that as one of those moments that really helped break down morality in America?
Absolutely. In the black community, when they replaced the husband, just so I can give people a little quick history.
Sure.
We had the Depression, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, his wife came to him and said, because they had this program where they were going to help the farmers out in the Dust Bowl, and she said, look, if you're going to do that for them, I need you to do something for black folk to help them out. So one of his aides said, look, we can make this happen, but let's make a deal with, you know, the mayors of these urban cities. We'll carve out a percentage of this money to blacks who are also hurt. In exchange, mayors get them to move over to the Democratic Party. A lot of folks think it has something to do with Martin Luther King, but that's not when the great migration of blacks from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party took place. So once that was done, blacks started receiving assistance just like the farmers were. Mm-hmm. But once we got over the Depression era, they changed it and started calling what the farmers were receiving subsidies. And if you go back and study, you see where farmers were getting money to not grow crops. But that was a whole nother crooked issue. At any rate, they decided to change what they called the assistance that the Negro was receiving, and it became known as modern-day welfare. And so what happened was they started going to black households that were receiving these funds, and they said, look, if you're going to get this money, the man can't be living in the house. It's going to be just for you and the kids. Now, notice the reason there was a separation in what the farmers were receiving and blacks was because they weren't going to tell the farmer, you got to leave the house. So they changed terminology. And so now you have black men being displaced or removed from the household just so his family could get money to eat. And over a period of time, the check replaced the man. And there were people that took advantage of it. Women would have more babies to get more money. Men would find women in several different projects, have babies with 2 or 3 of them, and, you know, he'd have places to stay all across town. So a lot of stuff, but it became generational in the black community. I've known 3 generations, grandmother, mother, and daughter, all on welfare, never been off welfare, on welfare their entire life, and no husband to speak of. I see women having, well, anyway, I'm not even going to get into illegitimacy, illiteracy, and black-on-black crime. But all of this was a result of the disenfranchisement of the institution of marriage within the black community. Why? Because Uncle Sam took the place of fathers in black homes. And therefore, there remaineth no more pride to be taught amongst men and women as to what was expected. And I'll tell you one last story. The deacon that I met with was telling me about his own daughter. Met a guy and came to him and said, look, I want to get married. And he told her, absolutely not. And he asked the young man, he said, what do you have, son, to bring to the table? He said, nothing. He said, would you want your own daughter to marry a guy like yourself? He said, no. And she went ahead and married him anyway, in spite of what he said to her. Lo and behold, the house that he had signed over to his daughter, fully paid for, They lost it a year later to foreclosure because he didn't got her to take out a second mortgage on it. I mean, a mortgage on it.
What a shame.
And so she lost. But this is the type of mentality that we are dealt with. Black women who don't understand what it is to have a man because they've never been around a mother who knew what it was to have a man because there wasn't one in the place. Young men who grow up who don't know what to look for in a woman because the only thing they've ever seen was a woman who was nothing but a revolving door of men. So you got this cycle that is ever repeating. And when I talk about these things in the black community, trust me, these are things that people don't want heard. They don't want to hear it. They don't want me talking about it on YouTube. I've been called Uncle Tom, Coon, Bootlicker, any of the names that you can think of. Been told all I'm doing is beating up black folks. I'm not beating up black folks. I'm trying to tell them what the problem is. How can you fix a problem if you can't even identify it? So you got to tell them what the problem is so that it is identifiable. And then once you've identified that you are suffering from that particular ailment, then you can begin to fix it. That's why I talk about it.
Absolutely right. And, you know, I say from time to time, I try to tell people, you know, one of the things that people really don't like, as much as they preach it, is change. They don't like change. Change is uncomfortable. The human condition, you know, the humans, typically when they get in their comfort zone, they like to stay there. They don't like to. Who likes it? You know, matter of fact, one of the things that I do is I'm teaching Constitution right now in our homeschool co-op, and one of those things that I brought up today was just that if you read the Declaration of Independence, the Declaration of Independence speaks to that simple fact that you know, people will tend to live in oppression if they feel like their well-being or their peace and safety is taken care of, and they won't fight for what's right or fight for what they believe in, for fear that they might lose what they have, and when in reality they've already lost it.
Absolutely.
And they just don't know it, you know, and that's the thing, is that people don't like to hear this stuff because it makes them uncomfortable, because that would mean they'd have to change something about themselves that they may not want to. And so that's one of the things that I run into all the time, is that pushback that you get because, oh, you know, that's not comfortable sounding. You know, that's not talking about the Patriots and you know, my favorite football team. Come on, man. We don't want to talk about that kind of stuff. So I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from there, because I get the same type of pushback. When we come back, we're going to talk about the false left-right paradigm some more. I'm going to bring up a blog post from Gathering the Storm, or waitingforthestorm.com. Now, this is Storm Cloud's Gathering on YouTube, but he wrote a great article a couple years back on breaking down the false left-right paradigm, and I'm going to get Derrick's thoughts on that. So don't go away, folks. You're listening to the Freedom Link on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Don't go away. Don't forget to tune in to some of the great new programming that Orion has to offer. Boy, I'll tell you what, we've got some great new hosts coming down the pipe. Holland Van den Nieuwenhof is going to be doing a broadcast here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. You might know him from the documentary A Noble Lie that went over the Oklahoma City bombing of 1995. As well as Derrick Brose of the Houston Freethinkers. He's going to be doing a broadcast here on the weekends as well. And Derrick was one of the people that were responsible for getting the TSA kicked out of Houston. So, I mean, we've got some great things working here at Orion Talk Radio, and I'm so glad to have Derrick Grayson on the program tonight as we're talking about the left-right paradigm, the false left-right paradigm at that. And I'm bringing up this blog post on waitingforthestorm.com, and it's breaking down the false left-right paradigm. And he writes, at the root of the political circus of the Western world, at the root of our dysfunctional and corrupt electoral system, is a very clever little lie that prevents the people from regaining control over the government. Once you see that lie for what it is, you'll never be fooled again, and you may find yourself insulted by the audacity of the proponents and maintainers of this lie. I am, of course, referring to the paradigm of left versus right, liberal versus conservative, Republican versus Democrat. The most effective lies have an element of truth. A little truth gives the lie a foothold in the mind and prevents the less vigilant from looking deeper. The false left-right paradigm is no exception. The power elite of this country and the world over have capitalized on common points of contention among worldviews of the citizenry and have managed to polarize them into two political categories, liberal and conservative. That is not to say that these disagreements aren't real. It should be obvious that some people are fiercely for abortion while others are fiercely against it. However, what may not be so obvious is that these points of contention, these wedge issues, are little more than distractions that prevent us from uniting. I know it's a bit inflammatory to refer to an issue like abortion as a distraction. Most people have strong feelings on the subject. I myself have strong feelings on the subject. However, the reality of the matter is that the politicians that use these kinds of issues to get us riled up in one direction or another are just manipulating us and turning us against each other. As long as they can successfully keep us fighting amongst ourselves over religious and moral controversies, and as long as they can maintain the illusion that the two parties are significantly different, we won't pay attention to their collusion on economic and foreign policy and the rampant corruption endemic on both sides of the aisle. On the issue that will determine the course of history and the future survival of this nation, the Republicans and the Democrats are perfectly synchronized in the march towards Armageddon. When it comes down to the principle of divide and conquer, what it comes down to is the principle of divide and conquer. The people of the United States will never be converted to one religion and will never come to an agreement on the best way to handle reproductive issues or homosexuality, which is why these issues are used over and over again. Those who pull the strings know that these issues will never be resolved, and they know that most people and they know that most people can be swayed to make a vote based purely on emotion. Knowing this gives us the secret to turning the country around. We must refrain from focusing on divisive wedge issues, which will never be solved, and we must unite under one cause: restore the Constitution of the United States. Without free speech, the right to a fair trial, and the guarantee that our government will not torture or murder its citizens, we have nothing. The protections provided under the Constitution have been eroded in this country by the Patriot Act and a slew of unconstitutional laws. This should anger you more than someone violating a precept of your particular belief system, because without the Constitution, your right to believe what you believe and to speak your mind can and will be taken away. A cursory examination of history is enough to see where we may end up if we allow ourselves to be turned against each other. And that, of course, was waitingforthestorm.com, and the YouTube channel is Storm Clouds Gathering. And, Derrick, here's my take on that is I agree in some aspects of it. I disagree in some aspects. But one thing is true, that they do use these issues to divide the populace and to make us fight amongst each other. And my thing is you can still be resolute in your values and your virtues and stand for what you believe in. But one thing is for certain, there's no piece of paper that tells you or gives you rights. Our rights come from our Creator. Hook, line, that's it. They come from God. Only God can take them away. You have to give them away. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with everything that you just read, for starters, and what you just stated. Mm-hmm. However, it is a little too complex for many people to even grasp. The ones who really need to get it are the people who are caught in the middle. And the way I explain everything that you just talked about, I break us up into three groups that are manipulated by our two-party system. George Washington, when he left office, said, beware of party systems. They were prevented in earlier times because people learned that they could destroy nations. And if we allow ourselves to get caught up into parties, then that could very well be our fate as well. And that's where we are with our two-party system, left versus right, primarily Democrats versus Republicans. They look at us like this. We have three segments of our society, basically. We have the poor, we have the middle class, we have the rich. The rich primary focus is insulation to maintaining their wealth. In other words, they want to continue to get wealthy and never be at risk of losing that wealth. And I don't have a problem with that. Then we have the middle class. The middle class, whether people realize it or not, that we are the foundation of this country. And then, of course, we have the poor. And what I always tell folk, the poor don't have a dog in the fight. The poor in this country primarily are motivated by social programs. This is how our two-party system garners votes. Democrats on the left pander to the poor by way of social programs. Republicans on the right pander to the rich via their proxies, lobbyists, and such, who get things passed to benefit business to the extent that it keeps corporate shareholders constantly in the rich. They get richer, and the middle class get poor. And the middle class, the goal of our two-party system, which has now become indistinguishable from each other, with the exception of the rhetoric that they spew to keep us divided by pitting the rich against the poor, and in the process decimating the middle class. They play to the heartstrings that you just spoke of earlier, dividing us on issues of abortion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, while at the same time working under the scenes and behind the scenes to decimate the middle class. Because once the middle class disappears in America, we then become a two-class society, the haves and the have-nots. And that is the agenda for the New World Order.
Amen to that. You know what? I want to interject something there, and this is one of those things that when people don't understand spirituality at its basic form, one thing to understand is God gave us all free will. He gave us all free will. It's a really powerful thing. It's a very simple thing, but sometimes people don't understand it. And we have to recognize that each person in this country, in the world, every human being is sovereign unto themselves. That's what they are. They have no subjects or anything else below them. They're human beings, and they can make decisions based on their life experience and based on what they believe in or what they choose. And you don't have to necessarily agree with them, but it's their choice. So if they want to be homosexual, if they want to be, if they believe in abortion or something like that, that's fine. They are their own individual. You can try and help them see, well, maybe that's not the right decision, maybe it is. But ultimately, it's their decision, and you have to respect that. And once that respect is there, the fight's done. There's nothing else to divide you with. So when we come back, it'll be the last segment of the broadcast, and we'll wrap it up. Don't go. The last segment of the broadcast, my guest, Derrick Grayson, the Minister of Truth, TMOTofGA on YouTube. Please go there and subscribe today and listen to some of those great videos that he puts out. And one thing that I like to focus on, Derrick, is I like to focus on solutions, because we can complain and we can talk about the problems all day, but unless we come up with solutions to solve these problems, then we're really not getting anywhere but just airing our grievances. So can you just speak to a little bit about what you see as solutions to the problems that exist today, and what you would recommend to people that are trying to enlighten others And because you know how difficult it can be.
Yes. One, to lead by example for those trying to enlighten others. That's the best advice I can give you. I take that from the example of Jesus Christ. Let your light shine. Light represents truth, knowledge. He says, would a man take a candle and put it under a basket? Of course not. Be the light at the top of the hill. Be the salt of the earth. And all those things that go along with it. So lead by example in trying to awaken in efforts to awaken others. Those that won't receive your words, shake the dust from your feet and keep on moving, and focus on those who are seeking the truth. Jesus say, I came for those who are lost. Well, to come for those who are lost, you got to know you're lost first. That's who Jesus was talking about. He wasn't talking about those who ain't paying them more attention. If you read the book of Revelation, talk about when he comes, there'll be those, in spite of the fact that they see his glory and know he done came and kicked some butt, they're going to be saying rocks fall on us rather than yield to the will of God. So that's why I say I don't waste my time with folk who ain't looking for the truth. Secondly, some of the solutions to some of our problems, politically speaking. We as Americans need to wake up, particularly white America, because you are the majority of the U.S. population. Black folks, 13% of the population, other minorities, even less than that. Bottom line, we may sweeten the pot, but when it comes down to it, white America has got to wake up to the illusion of there being two parties and the realization that both parties are hell-bent on destroying the middle class, which is most of America, the working class. So They need to wake up to that realization. And then when they wake up, they need to get involved and get activated and committed to replacing the bastards that are currently in Washington destroying this country. That's why I'm not worried about whether Ron Paul gets to Washington or not. I'm more concerned at the work and the preparation, the groundwork that Ron Paul has laid in helping us to realize what has been lost, what we're on the verge of allowing to be destroyed. Do I want Ron Paul in the White House? Of course I do. That's why he's still going to get my vote on November 6th. However, Ron Paul has shown us what we need to do. We need to replace the bastards in Washington. We got midterm elections coming up. This is the time to revolutionize and take this country back. This country belongs to us, we the people. So some of the solutions politically, again, to recap, we need to get involved, even if it means we got to run ourselves to replace those bastards in Washington. In our community, we have to recognize that the government was not put in place to be our savior. Read and study and learn what the Constitution actually says. If you have an understanding of what you're working with, then you know how to better go about carrying out the business of the day for yourself. You're teaching Constitution classes. That's something that needs to be taught everywhere. People need to understand what the Second Amendment is always about. It's not about hunting, okay? It's about a militia that can defend itself against the tyranny of its own country, which is where we are headed unless we take it back.
That's right. And this right shall not be infringed. People need to understand what that means and how judicial activism from the bench and judicial precedent has replaced the rule of law. You know, that's one of the major things that I've seen that people need to understand, and I speak about it frequently, is the change in the concept of law in the United States. It used to be equal justice under the law. That used to be the term that was used because the law applied to everyone equally. But today, it's now social justice under the law, meaning that whatever is socially acceptable at the time is the way the law swings. And the judiciary branch does the same thing in that, well, you know, they'll say, why, there's plenty of judicial precedent that says that this law, you know, that municipalities can regulate the sale and people having firearms. When I just look at the Constitution, I see the way it's written, and I can't imagine that. And it reminds me of that old video game with the lemmings on it, you know, whereas one lemming goes off the bridge and all the other ones follow. And that just seems to be the way that things have progressed in this country, whereas we kind of lack the critical thinking skills that we once had. And really, it's up to us to enlighten and educate, especially the young folks in this country, the young people, the ones that haven't been coerced or corrupted yet, the ones that are just now molding their belief structure, their belief system, and getting to know what they are and being educated. Now's the time to get them. And it's like you said, activism has many roles. There's many ways you can get active. You don't have to be out there running for office per se, although, the more the merrier. Believe me. I mean, the more people out there trying to unseat these criminals it'll yield results. The more people we get out there, the bigger the field, the better chance we have of getting more of these people out of office. And to be honest with you, Derrick, I really think we need we need a clean slate in Washington. We really do. These people here, they've been in there for a very long time. I always ask, name me one person in Washington that got there and didn't leave a millionaire. They all do. They all leave a millionaire. They're all corrupt. And not to say, hey, I'm all for making bank. I'm all for, making a wage, but not at the expense of the taxpayer. The one that you go there taking an oath to serve and to, take an oath to protect and the Constitution of the United States. And instead they usurp it all the time. Any closing thoughts?
All I can say is, brother, you and I are on the same page. No need to be saying what you just said. I'm right there with you.
Man, that's fantastic. I'll tell you what, I have faith. I do. I truly have faith that there are enough good people out there. I know that it seems like the walls are closing in, and that we look at the police state just in the last 6 months alone. All of the different executive orders and all of the different police state tactics. We look at some of the programs that have been put into place over the last 10 years with the 1033 program, DHS selling excess military gear to local police forces. We see the police ramping up the violence and all that kind of stuff. And it's all meant to control, but it's only if you let them control you, You have to give that away. And they're going to use force and intimidation. But we've seen that in our history before, and we've overcome that. Especially, we talked tonight about the black community. MLK showed it best. You can overcome that. You just have to have the courage to do it and stand by your convictions. Hold true to your virtues, your values, your morality. And don't vote for the lesser of two evils.
Yep.
I mean, serious. So, that's right. And as long as you do that and maintain the moral high ground, they can't touch you. They can't touch you. They'll try. But because you're a man of your convictions, just look at this election. What could they attack Ron Paul on? Mm-hmm. They couldn't, so they had to cheat. They had to go low down and dirty, and they had to cheat. They had to steal the election from him. Mm-hmm. And that's what they did, because they can't attack the man's character.
No, they can't. One thing I will say is this, before you go. Mm-hmm. When men have come with ideas that threaten the establishment,